My name is Pastor Zach. If I didn't get a chance to meet you when you're coming in, welcome. It's Family Sunday. We're going to be talking a little bit about time, counting our days, how precious that is. Before I do that, I have one more announcement, and that is that our budget is coming up for Clearview Community Church. And so on the back in the foyer is our proposed budget. We're going to be given more information as this gets closer. The vote is going to be in between services on the 9th. We are going to be putting out a straight talk, which is just like a bunch of details about what the new budget entails. And on the 6th, there is a forum you can come and ask questions about. So grab one of these. If you have any questions, please contact our office and we can get you updated. All those dates are on our website, and we'll keep reminding you of those. So wanted to announce that. All right, well, time's a weird thing. How time goes by. You know, there's some moments in our lives that seem to just go by really, really quick. There's other times that seem so slow. In first service, one of our good friends, her name is Brooke, she's getting ready to have her baby any day now or any minute now. And she was saying, just the time goes so slow, you know. I'm trying to stay distracted because it's going to go so slow. And there's other times when life just goes so fast. It just whizzes by. You're on vacation, something's going on in your life, and it just seems like the days go by really quick. And the older that we get, I think the more we realize just how quick time goes. And so today, for our Family Sunday, we wanted to highlight this. This is also why we did the display in the hallway, just to remind us, to kind of wake us up to today, how precious today is, how precious the time that God has given us is, and how do we make the most of that time. So if you have your Bibles, we're going to turn to a prayer of Moses. This is in Psalm 90. We're going to use a few verses out of Psalm 90. Now let me tell you a little bit about why this song and this prayer was written. It was written because there was a lot of sadness and sorrow in a man who looked around and noticed that his whole generation, his friends, the people that he was leading, had wasted their time. They had put the wrong things as priorities, and therefore they missed out on the promise that God had for them. And as a result, Moses is looking back over his life, and he's reflecting on the Israelites' time in the wilderness. And he's looking around and he's noticing that his siblings have passed. He's noticing that a lot of people who started out really strong at the end never are going to make it into the promised land that God has. And he's reflecting on that. And his prayer is not just for himself in his last days, but mostly it's to pass down to the next generation that God's going to call to say, don't make the same mistakes that we made. Make sure that you understand what a precious gift the time that God has given you is. So this is Psalm 90, starts in verse 1. He says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Basically, Moses says, we've been wandering through the wilderness. You rescued us from Egypt. And no matter where we were in that wilderness, no matter where our tents were set up, you were always with us. You, looking back, you're the only consistent thing in our lives. People come and go, houses sometimes come and go, jobs come and go, but you and your presence, you have been the place where we have dwelt, all of these generations. And then he kind of talks about how big God is. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. So he's just acknowledging God is over all of time, all of space. Before there was a thing even called time. Do you know that time was created? God lives beyond time. He created time, and he is beyond that. He's more powerful than even time. Down in verse 4, it says, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. In other words, sometimes in our life, it seems like things are going by really, really slow, especially when things are hard. You're waiting for a baby, you're going through suffering or sorrow. And Moses is realizing, he's looking back in his life and he's saying, man, we were going through some really hard times in the wilderness, and we gave up our hope. We gave up on faith. We didn't trust you. But now I'm looking back and I realized, to you, this 40 years, this time in the desert, it's just that quick to you. You see way beyond the time that we're here on earth. And we need to realize that we're not in charge of our lives the way that we think we are. So here's his question to God. He says this, teach us, he's talking about God's people, which applies to us today. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And what he means by numbering the days is, let's realize that the days that we have are days that are gifted to us by God. Our days are not everlasting. Our days have 24 hours in them. There's only so much time that God has given us each day. There's only so much time he's given us on this earth. And he's saying something I think that's a little bit different than our culture says sometimes. Remind yourselves that you don't have that much time here on this earth, and to really cherish what God has given you as a gift. He goes on to say, relent, Lord, how long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the works of our hands for us. Yes, establish the works of our hands. So Moses is realizing there's a lot of things that don't last. Anybody here ever built a sandcastle on the beach by the ocean? Put a whole lot of time in it. All of a sudden, the tide comes up. It's gone. And Moses is saying there are certain things in our lives that we put a lot of time and resources in that aren't going to last. He's reflecting back on his generation, the time that they spent worrying and grumbling and wishing that life was different. And then because of that, they were so bent and focused on trying to get someplace else that they didn't trust God for the day that they had in front of them. One of the reasons that God's people missed out on the promised land is because of grumbling. They were so filled with wishing their life was different, that God had provided for them different. You know, every morning when they woke up, as God was leading them to the promised land, he provided food. It was manna. And we don't know what manna tasted like, but it was all that they needed for, the energy for the day and to get them through what God had asked them to get through. But it probably got pretty tiresome to eat the same thing every day. And so God's people started to wish, gosh, I wish you would do something different. I wish it looked different or tasted different. Also, God said, I'm going to give you manna each day, but you can't store it up for tomorrow. You have to wake up every morning and trust me to give you what you need for this day. And God's people didn't like the way that he was leading. They were grumbling. Here's a grumbling cat for you to wake you up. This is what the Israelites' faces look like. So I want to talk just for a few moments, and this is, I hope, for you in your own heart, for our families, kind of a discussion starter about our time. How time gets wasted, how we end up prioritizing and spending time on things that are on things that aren't going to last. And sometimes, if we're not careful, like Moses, we get to the end of our lives and we look back and we go, man, I wish I would have seen life differently. Probably this sermon is coming from your pastor because I'm getting to the age where I'm starting to realize this more and more. Only one child in the house. He's 17. He only has, not very many weeks until he's 18, about 30 weeks probably till he's 18. And I'm looking and realizing, man, when our kids were small, when they were toddlers, when life was hard, we're changing diapers, it just seemed like, gosh, this stage in life is going to last forever. And it was kind of like, I can't wait until the next stage. I can't wait till my kids can put their shoes on, and which is still happening for some of my kids. I can't wait. I can't wait until this happens. I can't wait till this happens. I can't wait till this benchmark or whatever. And sometimes because we're so looking forward to how things might change, we miss out on the blessing. We miss out on the opportunity of today. What's right in front of us. And then we have this opportunity often to kind of look back and go, man, I didn't spend my time very well. As a pastor, one of the gifts that I have is doing memorial services. And it's a gift for me because I get to sit with family, and I oftentimes get to sit with people right at the end of their lives, and I get to listen to what lasted. Like, what at the end of your life do you wish you had? And for most people, a lot like the count. We think the count's crazy. I wish I had $1 million. I wish I could just spend more time, and especially as it gets cold in Buena Vista, spend more time in Florida. I wish I had a new washer and dryer. That would be great. But at the end of our lives, like the count, what matters most is we go, I wish I had more time with my spouse. I wish I had a few more weekends with my kids. Nobody at the end of their life says, man, I just wish I would have stayed at the office a little longer. Nobody at the end of their life says, one thing I didn't do enough was scroll on Facebook. If I just had maybe 6 or 7 more days of scrolling, I would be able to die with so much more joy. Those kinds of things don't come up at the end of people's lives. What comes up at the end of people's lives is, I wish I had more time. I wish I had some of that time back. So this is a prayer of wisdom. And the first thing that Moses is getting us to do is to say, ask God for wisdom. This is what Solomon did when he was in over his head. This is what James says in the New Testament. And it's a realization that we need wisdom to use our time well. We don't do this naturally. Did you know this? We as humans naturally put things that are not important ahead of things that are really important. And we kind of do this as a default. And so this prayer, this psalm, is a reminder for us as families that it's called upon by God because of our human nature. Ask God for wisdom. God, how do I use my time? Maybe you're retired and you're looking back and go, man, life went quick. And I have this amount of time. I'm told by retired folks, there's only a certain amount of time when you go, I don't know what I'm going to do with all my time. And then retired people tell me all the time, well, I'm way more busy than when I had a job. And that's because there's so many people that want your time. There's so many, because time is so precious. And all of a sudden you're busy, and time can just kind of get filled with all kinds of things. We have to ask God, would you give me wisdom? Would you teach me? The psalmist says, Moses says, teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. And this isn't just about, here's the rules. This is about, I have a sense of when I come into my life, this is for you kids and adults, I come across someone, I look at my kids, I look at my spouse, and I realize the weightiness of what a gift they are to me. And I don't just run by. The writer of Hebrews is reflecting on the men of faith, the men and women of faith throughout the Old Testament. He's talking about this season of the Israelites being in the wilderness and how they messed up. And he's letting us know that the Israelites in the wilderness, they started to have a hard heart against God. They started to want their own way so badly that they weren't able to follow God and receive all that God had given them. So he says, learn from them. This is what we're doing today at Family Sunday. Learn from that. He says, see to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. But encourage one another daily. And this is really key, as long as it's called today. In other words, the writer of Hebrews is saying this: today is all you have right now. God is giving you the grace for today. He's given you the opportunity for today. Tomorrow hasn't come yet. Yesterday's already passed. Today is what you have, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Our hearts get hard when we start to think too much in the future and what we wish life would be like or could be like in the future. Our hearts get hard when we live too much in the past and regret. And so we're asking God today for God for a heart of wisdom. He's our dwelling place. He is our eternal God. And so how do we number days? So I want to give a little illustration that someone gave to me. In fact, the man who gave me this illustration was a guy who, when my kids were young, his kids were teenagers. He was a little bit farther along than me. His name is Skeet Tingle, actually. And I was going to lunch, and I was like, man, I just don't have enough time in the day to get everything done. I feel overwhelmed. There's just too much. And he gave me this little illustration. He said it to me. I'm going to kind of illustrate it for you. kind of this idea. So I have some props here we're going to use. So this container, both these containers represent time, the gift that God has given you, all right? All of these different sized rocks represent our priorities. And as a general rule, we have a tendency to prioritize things that are not eternal, not important, and put those in front. Or sometimes we're just lazy and we just kind of let life go. And we end up, for me, spending too much time scrolling on Facebook, spend too much time, on things that aren't really eternal, spend a lot of time maybe worrying or doubting, those kinds of things. And we often put things that don't really matter very much. Sometimes they're even good things, but they're in the wrong order of priority. We put those in our day first, And then some of the other important things in our life. At different times in my life, these have represented different things. But this could be a hobby that you have that just starts to consume you. This could be when you're in high school. This could be sports. This isn't so much about time. It's about just your heart for things, thinking, gosh, this is going to be eternal. This is going to be my whole life. When I was in high school, I was sure that I was going to be playing basketball, competitively forever. Well, I wasn't. I'm not. Those kinds of things, we just kind of think this is what's most important. And so we put secondary things in this. This can even be represent, work sometimes. That we put that first before other things. And not that any of these things sometimes aren't important or God doesn't allow them, but they start to consume our lives first. And these big rocks represent the weighty things of life. The things in life that if we don't make sure we spend time with, we end up having regret with. This big rock represents your worship and your time with God. You're putting him first. The most weighty part of our reality is God. This represents your family. If you're married, this represents your spouse. It represents the relationship that most closely connects with representing the gospel to the world, which is your marriage, and your family. And this represents the other things in life. This represents where you serve. If you're serving someplace, for many of you, this represents your calling. Maybe that's in your work. And so what happens is we try to fit these in kind of at the end, thinking, we'll make time for this. But what happens in our life if we don't prioritize right, the biggest things in life, what happened with the Israelites, their faith and trust in God kind of doesn't fit in the container. It gets left out. And we end up living a life, if you think about the sandcastle, that's built on, all of these selfish desires often. And it gets washed away with time. I think what Moses is talking about with numbering our days is keeping first things first. And this is where wisdom comes in. Because we can have really good things and have them out of priority, and we end up losing both things. One simple analogy of this is sports. Okay, I'm a coach. I love sports. I love basketball. I love football. I think they're great tools for growing up and learning lots of lessons. I'm a middle school basketball coach, and one of the things we say almost every day after practice is, remember, you guys are student athletes, which means this: you have to put your studies first, you have to keep your grades up, or you don't get to be athletes, right? So if you prioritize being a basketball player and you don't prioritize school, what happens to school and athletics? You lose them both, right? This is the wisdom, I think, that Moses is talking about when we talk about the heart, the weighty things of our lives. This is true in families. I've seen this all the time. If your kids are real important and your marriage is really important, but if you're a parent that says, I'm going to prioritize my kids and their wants and their needs over my spouse's needs. And this takes wisdom because they're always clashing. But eventually, your marriage is going to suffer and your kids are going to suffer. Both are going to suffer. Early on in Catherine and I's marriage, went to marriage counseling. And our marriage counselor says, when you get home, I want you to prioritize the first thing you do is to sit on the couch and talk about your day. Just do it for 10 minutes. And I want you to watch, they said, I want you to watch what happens to your kids. All right, so we start out, get home, we're just gonna, mommy and dad, now the kids could be playing, they're doing whatever, hanging out, totally distracted. Dad gets home and says, you guys keep playing, your mom and I are just gonna have a conversation together. All of a sudden, 4 kids in between us, all chaos, crying and weeping and gnashing of teeth. You're tossing kids off like this, We just need 10 minutes like this. There's something that happens because our kids go, no, I want to be first. I want to be first. And we live in a culture that tends to just put our kids first even before our marriages. But here's the thing that's so true, that our kids think that that's what they want, but our kids' hearts really settle when they realize mom and dad are okay. Mom and dad love each other. Mom and dad have a strong relationship. They prioritize themselves. They go on date nights. They make themselves and their relationship a priority. Kids feel safer. It's another one of those priority things. And there's these kinds of things in all of life. The most weighty thing we can do that's tied to this passage is to be satisfied by God's love in the morning. And Moses says this is where everything went wrong with the Israelites, was in the morning. Instead of waking up in the morning and saying, God, what do you have for me today? You are my provider. You are the one that's leading me. Throughout the wilderness, God would lead them at night with a pillar of fire, through the day with a pillar, with a cloud. He was always leading them. Everything that they needed, when they needed water, when they needed food, God was there to provide. And Moses was saying, wake up in the morning and say, God, what have you given me? You are my provider. You are my Lord. To set our hearts on him first before anything else. At the beginning of your week, you guys are here, it's Sunday, it's the beginning of the week. You've set your heart and your family saying this: worshiping of God, hearing his word is going to be the priority for our week. Everything else comes after that. And our finances, God, thank you for these resources. Here's my offering to you first. This is weighty. I want to thank you for what you've done. It sets our heart out of grumbling. The second priority for many of us in this room, like I said before, is your spouses, is your family. And you say, I'm going to pray and ask God for wisdom. How do I love my family? How do I share God's love with my spouse? How do I help them to know God's faithfulness in their life, to pray for them? And then God has given you a calling. My calling is to be a pastor. Some of you guys are retired, and God's calling, is sometimes harder to discern. But he's giving you something to do, a way to serve beyond yourself. And that has to be in there, in this thing. And then there's all these other things in life. I talked before. Here's the sports. Here's one of your guys' boats that you love so much. Your fly rod. There's all these really good things that God has given us to enjoy life. There's some really good stuff in here, okay? Sports, the Broncos, all these kinds of things are in here. These kinds of things in our life, have to be put into our life after we make the most important things most important. Now there's bets. First service, there was bets in the back about whether this was going to work. And I won that bet, but I may not win this bet, but it worked. Okay. And then this represents just kind of the fleeting moments of our days. I was talking to somebody after first service, and they were saying, man, this message is so good for me. I can't believe how much time I find myself wasting on my phone. This is new for our generation, but did you know that your phone has a little brain in it called artificial intelligence, and it actually wants to give you what you think you want, all right? You watch one reel, you look on one news feed on your Facebook page, and they go, oh, I know what this person wants. I know, this is what it's saying. I know how to get more of your time. And then here's the next thing. And then here's the next thing, and here's the next thing, and here's the next thing. And pretty soon you can look back, just check on your phone and see how much time you've spent looking at things and wondering, is this the best time for me to use of God? And we do this with lots of things. But if we put that first, we end up seeing all the other things in our life not fitting. We prioritize God, we prioritize our family, prioritize serving. God knows the desires of our heart, and I don't know what God thinks really about scrolling, but he knows that we need leisure. He knows that we need hobbies. He knows that, there's all kinds of things going on in our life. I want to say this too. Okay, I won the bet. That all fit. Yay. I want to say this that's really important. I think one of the ways that God called Israel to worship that they got wrong was the area of Sabbath. Israel had such a hard time practicing the Sabbath. They had such a hard time just stopping for one day of the week and saying, God, I'm not going to toil. I'm not going to work, all these days of the week. I'm going to take one day and I'm going to worship you and I'm going to receive your goodness and I'm going to recognize that I'm not in charge of my life. I'm going to recognize that you've given me rest, that you've given me life. Sabbath is an act of worship. It's not wasting time. But I think what happens in our hearts if we don't take Sabbath, if I don't take Sabbath, and I don't prioritize that, then my heart starts to long for rest, and it starts to look for it in all the wrong places. And I start to waste my time. That was just a really helpful thing for me in my marriage that Skeet gave me. There's times in our family where everything's a mess. My wife and I are fighting. It seems like our kids aren't doing well. Money is tight. Everything goes sideways. And almost every time, if Catherine and I sit down and pray, and I take some time with the Lord, there's one of these big, weighty things that is out of proportion. I have put things that don't matter as the first thing in my day, that don't matter as much eternally as first things in my day, and I've neglected my fellowship, my feasting on God's goodness, his gospel. My heart starts to grow hard towards him, and in our family, everything goes awry if our priorities aren't right. And so this takes wisdom to pray and to ask the Lord, what does this look like? I've already talked about this, but second part in this psalm for us as families is to be satisfied with God's love. Moses says this, satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Moses is not saying that their days are supposed to be easy. Their days are hard. They're in the wilderness. But they could not be glad in this season that they were in because they were grumbling and unthankful for all that God had done from taking them out of slavery. For some of us, this is such a pervasive thing that happens in our heart. We so quickly start to compare ourselves with other people. This is also another danger of social media. We compare the outside of people's lives to our inner world. Do you know that we do this? And it seems like our friends are always in Florida. It seems like our friends always have $1 million. It seems like our friends' washers and dryers never stop working, but ours do. My life is horrible. How come my life can't be like someone else? And we start to envy, we start to compare ourselves instead of being satisfied with what God has done in us and with us and given to us. The only way we can walk forward is if we receive the blessing that God has for us. This lamentation has gotten me through so many dark days. Some of those days that seem like they're so slow when you're grieving the loss of a loved one, when you're going through a hard time, when you're waiting for a baby to be born, This is a promise. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. It never ceases. God is always on the look to provide and care for his people. His mercies never come to an end. Now, this is such a good news thing. Every single morning, they're new. God has a mercy. Every morning you wake up, I have provision for you. I have manna for you. I have all that you need for today. Just rely on me. I'm going to give you the wisdom that you need with your boss. I'm going to give you the wisdom that you need with your spouse. Just trust in me. Do not lean on your own understanding. So here's a question for us as families. What would change if we treated each day like a gift from God? What if we stopped seeing time as the enemy? There's never enough time. And we started to see the time that God has given us, even the struggles, even the trials, as gifts that God has given us. I say this to parents with young toddlers all the time, and they roll my eyes, just like I rolled my eyes at the people that were older than me. Don't miss these days. Don't miss these moments. Don't miss the nap times. Don't miss the hardship. Don't miss the challenges that you're facing right now. I look back at how much I wanted my kids to have their license, and I'm so glad they have a license. But you know what some of my favorite times were is driving my kids to school. Some of my favorite times are driving my boys back from sporting events and having conversations with them. And you know what? As soon as your kids get your license, you have way less time for them. Good news is you have to take them to a lot less stuff. That's a good thing. And God has new seasons. But what if we saw each season that we are in as God's gift? One of our good friends here in the community passed away. His name was Will Franz. Will Franz, he died of cancer. He died well. He died well. He died with integrity. He died with faith. He died with courage. It didn't mean that it wasn't excruciating. It didn't mean that he didn't have time, that he didn't doubt, but he finished his race well. And one of the reasons that he did that is he had some mantras that he lived by that were sort of helped him wake up every morning and just put the heaviest rocks in the right place. One of the things that Will Franz would do, we learned this about in his memorial service, is every day, no matter how cold it was, he would walk outside, he would look up, he'd hold his hands out like this, and he'd look at whatever weather it was, and he'd say, God, thank you so much for this day. May I enjoy every part of it, even the hard stuff. Will had a couple other things. He prioritized his kids through life. He had a hard, fast rule that if his kids called him, he answered the phone every time. I would never get work done if that was my mantra. I promised to call my kids back every time. But he answered. He would be with a client. He was a counselor. He would be with a client, and if he was with a client, and it was a really intense moment, and he would tell him before he started with his client, if my kids call, I'm going to have to answer the phone. And I watched it. I did some counseling with Will, and I watched his kids call one time. I just need a minute. He prioritized his kids. One of his other mantras was, always be ready for an adventure. Now, if you knew Will Franz, he walked all the time, especially when he lived in town. He kept a journal, and his kids said that he averaged between 15 and 20,000 steps every day of his life. I mean, he was a walking fool, okay? And you think, well, what motivated him to stay so in shape? He ate well. Everyone thought he lived to 100. He didn't. But what motivated him to maintain his health and to be ready? And it was this mantra, always be ready for an adventure. He didn't see exercise as an ends to itself, but it was a means to love his family. It was a means to jump in on whatever God had. His kids would ask him, why do you walk so much? I walk so much as an old man because I want to be ready when you say, let's go climb a 14er, that I'm ready to go. I walk so much because I want to be ready when you want to go fishing, I'm ready to go fishing. I want to be ready when God says, I have a work for you to do, or I want to send you to do a missional work, that I am ready as I can be. If he says go, I'm prepared in my heart, send me. This is a life well lived. So as we wrap up, this last movement is to pray for God to establish our work. You know, all we can do is be faithful with what God gives us. That's no guarantee that in this life even we're going to see everything work out. Moses didn't. In fact, what was accredited to him as righteousness, as well done, good and faithful servant, wasn't that he saw everything work out, his family and his everything being perfect and everything being in order in his life, but that he trusted God for all things. He was a man of faith. He didn't even get to see the end results of what was going to happen, how he was going to start to pave the way for the Messiah to come. But his prayer was, God, take the things that I do, the way I spend my time, may they be worship, and may you establish them. May my legacy, the way people remember me, the way my kids see me, God, would you produce fruit in what I'm doing? 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Sometimes it can really seem like what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, it's not going to make a difference. God is more concerned about your heart of wisdom and worship than he is about what exactly you're doing. And he can take a heart. He took Joseph, who was neglected and treated horribly by his brothers. He took that misuse and he offered it to the Lord, and the Lord used it in such an incredible way to save the nation of Israel. Rahab, who had a horrible past as a prostitute and was not walking with God, gave her heart to God. God redeemed that and used her in the lineage of Jesus. And we've just studied Peter. Despite denying Jesus, he came and he repented, and God established that repentance and used his story for his goodness. So as families, let's stand together. I want to pray for you. I hope this just starts some great conversations. If you have younger kids, we have some devotional papers out in the foyer that you can just have a daily kind of question and prayer time to think through some of this. And I pray that the Lord will use this. Father, thank you for this time as a family. Thank you for Psalm 90. Lord, we offer you our lives. We offer you our time. We acknowledge, Lord, that on our own, we are not good at prioritizing what's most important. And so I pray, Lord, this is the prayer of us as your people. Would you help us to number our days? Would you give us a heart of wisdom for what is most weighty, what's most important in our families? Help us not to miss what's right in front of us that you have for us. In Christ's name, amen.